The cameras flashed, but they weren't for her. She stood 7 months pregnant at the Harrison Foundation gala, clutching a glass of water, while her millionaire husband, William Harrison III, wrapped his arm around another woman. In front of all of New York high society, he raised a glass not to his wife, but to his mistress, publicly humiliating the woman carrying his child. 5 years later, his company is crumbling, and the board is waiting on a new CEO to save them. The elevator doors open, and in walks his new boss. It's her. This isn't just a comeback, it's a takeover. The penthouse at 157 wasn't a home, it was a statement. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god-like view of Central Park, a sprawling green carpet laid out 80 stories below. But to Catherine Harrison, the view felt like a cage. The glass was cold to the touch, just like the marriage it represented. Everything was glass and steel and shades of grey, a monochrome existence punctuated only by the astronomical price tags of the art on the walls. Catherine, now 7 months pregnant, traced the outline of a brittle, leafless tree in the park below. She was supposed to be happy. She was the wife of William Will Harrison III, the charismatic, ruthless heir to the Harrison global logistics empire. Their life was a curated series of press releases, glamorous trips, strategic philanthropic gestures, and now the joyous expectation of an heir. But the reality was silence. Will hadn't touched her, not really touched her, with affection, in months. He was a man of transactions. Their marriage had been a transaction, her quiet, stable, old money family name, though the money was long gone, for his boisterous new money empire that needed a veneer of class. The baby, she had hoped, would be the one thing that was real, the one thing that was theirs. She heard the whisper of the private elevator arriving. Will was home. He strode into the vast living room, loosening the dark silk tie of his bespoke Tom Ford suit. He didn't look at her, his gaze already fixed on the tablet in his other hand. "You're home early," Catherine said, her voice soft, hopeful. "Board meeting finished. Davies is still waffling on the Alistair Holdings merger," he muttered, tossing his jacket onto a $50,000 suede chair. Incompetent fool. He walked to the bar, pouring himself 3 fingers of Macallan 25. "Will, the gala is tonight," she reminded him gently. "The Harrison Foundation event. It's the big one." "I'm aware, Catherine. I'm paying for it." He took a sip, the ice clinking. "Isabella is handling the press. She's sorting out the seating charts." Isabella. The name landed like a stone in Catherine's stomach. Isabella Vance, Will's senior VP of Public Relations, a woman who was all sharp angles, crimson lipstick, and a predatory intelligence. A woman who looked at Catherine not with malice, but with something far worse. Pity. Isabella, who handled everything, who handled Will. "I picked up my dress," Catherine tried again, forcing a smile. "It's a custom Lanvin. They did a beautiful job with the, you know." She gestured to her swollen stomach. "Good. Great." He was scrolling through emails. "Make sure you're ready by 7. The photographers will be there for the entrance. I need this to look good, Catherine. The Alistair board is watching. A stable family image is paramount." A stable family image, not a stable family. Is she sitting at our table?" Catherine asked, already knowing the answer. "Of course," Will said, not looking up. "She's running the event. I need her nearby in case one of these old money dinosaurs says something stupid to the Wall Street Journal. Don't be difficult, Catherine. You know her role is vital." Catherine nodded, the familiar sting behind her eyes. She had known, for the better part of a year, that Isabella's role extended far beyond public relations. She saw the late-night texts he thought he'd hidden. She smelled the faint, unfamiliar Chanel perfume on his shirts when he came home from late mergers. She saw the way his eyes followed Isabella in the boardroom, a hunger he never, ever directed at his own wife. She had stayed silent for the baby. She believed the baby would change everything. It would anchor Will, make him see what was real, what mattered. The gala tonight, his foundation's biggest event, was supposed to be their night, a celebration of their family, their future. "I'll go get ready," she whispered. Will just grunted in response, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of his tablet. As Catherine walked to their cavernous bedroom, she passed a framed photo on the marble console. It was from their wedding, 3 years ago. Will was smiling, but his eyes were cold, focused on the camera, on the image. She was smiling too, but she was looking at him, desperate for him to look back. She stopped and touched the cold glass of the frame. She felt her son kick, a small, hopeful flutter beneath her heart. "It's okay, little one," she murmured, pressing her hand to her stomach. "Tonight he'll see us. Tonight, he'll finally see." But as she zipped up the deep emerald silk of her gown, a chilling premonition settled over her. She wasn't an idiot. She was a woman who had been systematically isolated, made to feel dependent, and gaslighted into believing her suspicions were just hormonal or ungrateful. Tonight wasn't a celebration. It felt like an execution. And she was walking willingly to the gallows, draped in French silk. The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering diamonds and counterfeit smiles. It was the epitome of New York's philanthropic elite, a place where billionaires wrote checks to cleanse their corporate sins and socialites competed for the brightest spotlight. Tonight, the spotlight was firmly on the Harrison table. Catherine felt the weight of hundreds of eyes as she walked beside Will. Her pregnancy, once her private hope, now felt like a public vulnerability. She was a ship in full sail, and she felt desperately, dangerously exposed. Will was electric, a king in his element. He gripped her elbow in a gesture that looked like affection to the cameras, but felt like a vice to her. "Smile, Catherine," he hissed, his own smile a brilliant white flash. "You look pale." They reached the head table, and there she was, Isabella Vance, seated directly to Will's right, in a backless, blood-red dress that seemed to suck all the light in the room toward it. She looked like a weapon. "Catherine, you look lovely." "So maternal," Isabella purred, her eyes flicking over Catherine's baby bump with a clinical, dismissive air. She rose and gave Catherine an air kiss that smelled of champagne and victory. "Isabella," Catherine replied, forcing her own smile. "The room is beautiful." "Thank you. I micromanaged every detail. Will knows he can count on me to get things done." She shot a look at Will so intimate, it made Catherine's blood run cold. The dinner was a blur of polite conversation. Catherine poked at a seared scallop, the smell making her nauseous. She listened as Will and Isabella dominated the conversation, recounting a genius, hostile takeover in Chicago, finishing each other's sentences. The other guests at the table, a bank CEO, a senator, a tech mogul, watched the interplay, their expressions ranging from amusement to mild embarrassment. Catherine was invisible. She was the broodmare, the placid, smiling accessory. Then it was time for the speeches. Will stood up, tapping his glass for silence. The room quieted instantly. "Thank you all for coming," Will began, his voice reasoning with power and charm. "The Harrison Foundation is proud to support this city's future. We believe in building things that last, legacies, strong foundations." Catherine felt a small swell of pride. This was the man she had tried to love. "A company, a legacy, is not built by one man," Will continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. "It is built by vision. It is built by tireless dedication. It is built by a partner who sees the world not just for what it is, but for what it can be." Catherine's hand went to her stomach. He was talking about them, about the baby. "This last year has been transformative," Will said, his gaze locking on to someone. Not her. His eyes were fixed, with a burning, raw intensity, on Isabella. "I have been lucky enough to have a partner who is fearless, brilliant, and truly, truly indispensable. A person who has sacrificed everything to stand by my side, to fight the battles with me, to build this empire." The room was silent. Everyone could see where he was looking. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't happening. "So I want to raise my glass," Will said, lifting his champagne flute high. "Not just to the foundation, but to the real architect of my success, the woman who is the future of the Harrison brand." He turned, beaming, and held his glass out to Isabella. To Isabella Vance. Isabella stood up, her red dress catching the light. She looked directly at Catherine, her smile a mask of triumph, and then turned back to Will, accepting the toast. The room erupted in confused, polite applause. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. The millionaire toasting his mistress and his pregnant wife, frozen, staring at them, her face a perfect mask of horror. It was a public execution. He hadn't just admitted to the affair, he had celebrated it. He had declared Isabella his true partner and Catherine a glorified surrogate. Catherine stood up. The scraping of her chair was agonizingly loud. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to move. She mumbled, "Excuse me," and walked, as quickly and gracefully as she could, toward the exit, her hand pressed against her stomach. She made it to the marble-floored corridor before the first sob tore through her. She ducked into a small alcove near the coat check, fighting for air. The click of heels on the marble floor stopped behind her. "You really shouldn't make a scene, Catherine." She turned. It was Will. His face was no longer charming. It was cold, hard, and angry. "How could you?" she whispered, the tears streaming hot on her cheeks. "In front of everyone. Our friends? You're bored? I'm carrying your child." "Don't be naive," he snapped, his voice a low hiss. "You knew what this marriage was. It was a contract. You fulfilled your part of the bargain. You're giving me an heir. But don't ever mistake your role for Isabella's." "My role?" she choked out, disbelieving. "You are a placeholder, Catherine. A comfortable, appropriate placeholder. Isabella, she's my equal. She challenges me. She understands what I want. The merger with Alistair Holdings is next week, and I can't have a weak, sentimental woman on my arm. I need a killer. I need her." "So what am I?" Catherine asked, the tears stopping, replaced by a terrifying, icy calm. "What happens to me and the baby?" "You'll be fine," he said dismissively. "You'll have the Harrison name. The child will have a trust fund. You'll be comfortable. But we," he gestured back to the ballroom, "are over. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. My lawyers will be in touch with you. They'll be very generous, as long as you are quiet and cooperative." He adjusted his tuxedo cuffs. "Now, I suggest you go home. My driver is waiting out front. I'm going back to the party. Isabella and I are celebrating." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the cold corridor, the sound of applause and laughter from the ballroom echoing behind him. She looked down at her emerald silk dress, now stained with her tears. He hadn't just left her. He had gutted her, displayed her for parts, and left her to bleed out on the floor of the Plaza Hotel. The last thread of hope she'd been clinging to didn't just break, he had set it on fire. The humiliation was absolute. By morning, The gossip columns were ablaze. "Harrison Ayres Gala Gambit," screamed one headline. "Wife out, mistress in," declared another. The photos were brutal. Will toasting Isabella and Catherine, alone and pregnant, fleeing the ballroom. Will's lawyers descended, as promised. They were not generous. They were sharks. They offered a one-time settlement that was insulting, contingent on her signing a comprehensive NDA that would forbid her from ever speaking about Will, Isabella, or Harrison Global. When she hesitated, still in shock, they became ruthless. They froze her access to their joint accounts. They claimed in a preliminary filing that she was emotionally unstable and a potential risk to the Harrison heir, using her heartbroken flight from the gala as proof. Suddenly, the staff at the penthouse, the driver, the housekeeper, were no longer hers. They were Will's eyes and ears, reporting her every tearful phone call. She was a prisoner in her own home. She was forced to move into a small, sterile apartment, paid for by Will's lawyers on a month-to-month lease, a leash to ensure her compliance. The opulence of 157 was replaced by beige walls and cheap furniture that smelled of particle board and glue. She was alone, 8 months pregnant, and legally gagged. 2 weeks later, she gave birth to her son, Thomas, in a public hospital, alone. She called Will's office to inform him of his son's birth. His secretary informed her that Mr. Harrison was in negotiations in Zurich and would address the matter upon his return. He never called. He never came. He never saw his son. Catherine held her tiny, perfect baby in the sterile hospital room and made a vow. She would not be a victim. She would not be a footnote in William Harrison's biography. Her son would never know this weakness. Her heartbreak, so vast it felt like it would drown her, slowly, painfully, began to crystallize. It hardened from grief into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. A month later, a registered letter arrived at her apartment. It wasn't from Will's lawyers. The return address was in Mayfair, London. She didn't recognize the name. Richard Alistair. She opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter, old-fashioned, written on thick, cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Catherine, you do not know me. I am your mother's brother. We were estranged long before you were born, a family quarrel of no importance now. I have respected that estrangement, perhaps foolishly. I have been following your situation in the press. Your husband, William Harrison III, is the son of a man I despise. The old William Harrison was a thief who built his empire on stolen ideas. I see the apple has not fallen far from the tree. He is trying to merge with my company, Alistair Holdings. He will fail. I, however, have a problem. I am an old man. I am dying. And I have no heir. I have watched you from afar. You have your mother's resilience, but you also have my blood. I cannot let what I have built fall into the hands of vultures like the Harrisons. I am offering you a different life, a life of power. Come to London, you and your son. I will teach you everything I know. I will teach you how to build, how to command, and how to dismantle. I will give you the one thing that woman Isabella and your husband truly respect: control. When I am gone, Alistair Holdings will be yours. What you do with it is your own concern. But I suspect we share a mutual interest in seeing the Harrison Empire brought to its knees. A car will be waiting outside your apartment building tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you are in it, your new life begins. If you are not, I will not write again. Your uncle, Richard Alistair Catherine, read the letter 3 times. It was insane. It was a lifeline. It was a weapon. She looked at her son, Thomas, sleeping in a borrowed bassinet. Will had left her with nothing. He had counted on her being weak, broken, and silent. He had made a fatal miscalculation. He hadn't destroyed her. He'd just given her a reason to live. The next morning, Catherine packed one small suitcase with clothes for herself and Thomas. She left the insulting divorce papers unsigned on the cheap laminate kitchen counter. She left the keys to the apartment. At 10 a.m., a black, unassuming sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a simple dark suit got out and opened the rear door. "Miss Harrison?" "It's Alistair," Catherine said, her voice clear and steady for the first time in months. "My name is Catherine Alistair." She strapped her son into the car seat, got in, and didn't look back as the car pulled into traffic, heading for the airport. She wasn't fleeing. She was advancing in a new direction. The next 5 years were a brutal, relentless education. London was not a refuge, it was a forge. Richard Alistair was a titan of industry, a cold, brilliant man who saw the world in terms of assets, liabilities, and leverage. He wasn't a warm uncle. He was a mentor, a drill sergeant, and a kingmaker. He adored his grandnephew Thomas, but with Catherine, he was merciless. "You're thinking with your heart, Catherine," he would bark at her during their 6 a.m. breakfast meetings in his Mayfair townhouse. "Your heart is a liability. Your husband counted on that. Do not make the same mistake." She started in the mailroom of Alistair Holdings, a sprawling European logistics and private equity firm. She learned the business from the ground up. She worked 18-hour days while a nanny, paid for by Richard, cared for Thomas. She earned her MBA at night from the London School of Economics. She learned finance, corporate law, and mergers and acquisitions. She learned how to spot a weakness in a balance sheet from a mile away. The soft, hopeful woman who had cried in the plaza was gone. In her place was Catherine Alistair, CEO. When Richard passed away peacefully 2 years into her training, the board, at his ironclad direction, voted her in as his successor. She was terrifyingly competent. She was cold, precise, and fair. She expanded Alistair Holdings into new markets, her strategies so aggressive they bordered on predatory. She didn't just command respect, she manufactured it. Her London office was the opposite of Will's penthouse. It was warm woods, leather-bound books, and soft lighting. On her desk, there was only one photo, a smiling, 4-year-old Thomas on a pony in the English countryside. Meanwhile, back in New York, Harrison Global was rotting from the inside. Without Catherine's stabilizing influence and Richard Alistair's company as a potential and now impossible merger, Will's worst instincts had taken over. He and Isabella, whom he had married in a lavish, garish ceremony in Lake Como, were the new king and queen of conspicuous consumption. They bought jets, yachts, and a private island. Isabella's PR budget was a black hole of company funds, spent on designer wardrobes, million-dollar parties, and vanity projects. Will, desperate to look like a visionary, made a series of disastrous, high-risk investments in tech startups that imploded. Harrison Global, once a blue-chip behemoth, was now hemorrhaging money. The stock was plummeting. The board was in quiet rebellion. Will and Isabella, blinded by their own arrogance, were scrambling, taking out high-interest loans to cover their losses, leveraging the company's core assets to the hilt. They were desperate for a cash infusion, a buyout, a savior. In her London office, Catherine read the quarterly reports from her New York acquisitions team. Harrison Global was bleeding out. It was vulnerable. It was cheap. "Mr. Grant," she said over the intercom to her chief legal counsel, Mason Grant. Mason walked in, a sharp man in a Savile Row suit. "Ma'am, we're setting up a new shell corporation, Bridgewater Capital. I want it domiciled in Delaware, funded through our Cayman accounts. It's to remain completely anonymous." "Anonymous acquisition, hostile or friendly?" Mason asked. "It will begin as friendly," Catherine said, her eyes fixed on the New York skyline on her monitor. "I want you to make a tender offer for a controlling stake in Harrison Global. They're desperate, so they'll see it as a rescue. Will Harrison is too arrogant to believe anyone would mount a hostile takeover, and too stupid to see who's really behind it." "He'll fight it," Mason warned. "Let him," Catherine said, a small, cold smile touching her lips for the first time in years. "He'll leverage himself even further. Let him panic. Let him rally the board. And when he's exhausted all his options, Bridgewater Capital will go hostile. We'll buy their debt. We'll buy their outstanding stock. We will buy him." "Understood. And when the acquisition is complete?" Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grey London rain. "When it's complete, you will schedule an emergency board meeting at Harrison Tower. I'll be attending. Personally." The boardroom on the 50th floor of Harrison Tower was thick with the smell of old money and new panic. The long, polished mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the board members. William Harrison III paced at the head of the table, his face slick with sweat, his usual bravado cracked and flaking. Isabella Harrison sat at his right, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. Her flawless mask of makeup couldn't hide the frantic energy in her eyes. "This is an ambush!" Will shouted, slamming his hand on the table. This Bridgewater Capital, it's a vulture fund. They came in pretending to be a partner, and they've spent the last 6 weeks buying our debt, poaching our shareholders. It's a hostile takeover, plain and simple." "A takeover you allowed, Will," said Michael Davies, the oldest board member, his voice dry as paper. "You leveraged the company to the brink to cover your expansion projects. This board warned you. You are the one who put the "for sale" sign on our front door." "We can fight this," Isabella interjected, her voice a little too sharp. "We can file an injunction. We can—" "You can do nothing, Mrs. Harrison," Mason Grant said, standing by the door. He was the only calm person in the room. The sale was finalized. As of 9 a.m., Bridgewater Capital acquired a 51% controlling stake in Harrison Global. The new owner has called this meeting. Will stopped pacing. "Owner? Who? Who is it? Who's behind this? I'll double their offer. The main boardroom door slid open with a heavy, expensive whoosh. All heads turned. First, 2 associates from Mason Grant's law firm walked in, carrying briefcases. Then, Mason stepped aside, and she walked in. Catherine Alistair. She was not the woman they remembered. The soft, mousy wife was gone. This woman was sculpted from steel. She wore a bespoke navy blue power suit that was severe and elegant. Her hair, once a gentle brown, was a sleek, dark chestnut, pulled back in a chignon that highlighted the sharp intelligence in her eyes. She radiated an aura of absolute, untouchable control. The room went tomb silent. Will's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared as if he'd seen a ghost. Isabella's crimson-painted lips parted in a silent "oh." She recognized the look of a predator. Catherine walked slowly, deliberately, to the head of the table. She placed her leather satchel down, not on the chair beside Will, but on the chair at the head of the table. Will's chair. She looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was not hateful. It was not even satisfied. It was neutral, the way one might look at a piece of furniture that was in the way. "You're in my seat, Will," she said. Her voice was quiet, with a clipped, transatlantic accent honed in London. Will just stared, sputtering. "Catherine? What is this? What are you doing here?" "She's here," Mason Grant announced, as the sole proprietor and CEO of Bridgewater Capital, which, as you know, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Alistair Holdings. Catherine finally turned her gaze to the stunned board. "Good morning, gentlemen. And Ms. Chen," she nodded to the one other woman. "I am Catherine Alistair, the CEO of Alistair Holdings, and as of 9:01 a.m., I am the majority shareholder and new chairwoman of Harrison Global." The blood drained from Will's face. He physically staggered back, gripping the table for support. No, that's impossible. Richard Alistair hated me. He's dead." "He was my uncle," Catherine said simply, as if stating the weather. "And he was a very smart man. He left his company to family. Now, if you'll all please take your seats, we have a lot to discuss." Isabella found her voice first. "You bitch!" she hissed. "This is what? Some kind of pathetic revenge fantasy." Catherine looked at Isabella, truly looked at her, for the first time. She tilted her head, a scientist examining a microbe. "Revenge? Mrs. Harrison, this is a corporate restructuring. Harrison Global is a failing company with bloated executive leadership and catastrophic debt. I am here to fix it. This isn't personal, it's just business." She turned to the board, who were watching this with a mixture of terror and awe. "My first act as chairwoman," Catherine continued, her voice crisp, "is to announce a full, external, and forensic audit of the last 5 years of executive expenses, all PR and marketing budgets, and all private travel." Isabella's face went from red to a ghostly white. "My second act," Catherine said, "is to schedule immediate performance reviews for all senior executive staff. My team will be handling them." She looked at Will. "We'll start with your division, Will. I believe you're head of acquisitions. We should discuss those failed tech startups." Will was shaking. "You can't. This is my company. My father." "Your father's company," Catherine corrected him, "is now my company. You are, as of this moment, an employee, and frankly, Mr. Harrison, your performance has been deeply unsatisfactory. Mr. Davies, please move. I believe Mr. Harrison needs to sit down." She took her place at the head of the table. The king was dead. Long live the Queen. The audit was not a review. It was an autopsy. Catherine's team of forensic accountants, led by Mason Grant, descended on the executive floor of Harrison Global like a wolf pack. They were not interested in spreadsheets. They were interested in receipts, travel manifests, and offshore bank accounts. Within 72 hours, they found what Catherine already knew was there. The rot was concentrated in 2 places: Will's catastrophic high-risk investments, which he'd hidden from the board, and Isabella's PR budget. Isabella hadn't just been spending lavishly, she had been committing wire fraud. She had created shell companies, fake event planners, consulting firms, and influencer agencies, and had been awarding them 7-figure contracts from the Harrison Global marketing budget. The money was then funneled directly to a private account in her name. She had stolen, by their initial estimate, over $22 million. Catherine sat in her new office, Will's old office, which she'd had completely redecorated in warm woods and soft greys, removing the garish chrome and black leather, when Mason Grant brought her the final report. "It's worse than we thought," Mason said, placing the thick binder on her desk. "It's not just embezzlement. It's tax evasion, wire fraud." "She's creative." "And Mr. Harrison?" Catherine asked, flipping to the executive summary. "Willfully ignorant at best. Complicit at worst," Mason replied. "He co-signed on 3 of the largest contracts to the shell companies. He may not have known where the money was going, but he's on the hook for gross negligence. The board has grounds to terminate him with cause. No severance, no parachute." "No," Catherine said. Mason looked surprised. Ma'am? Firing him is an escape. He'd take his remaining personal wealth, lick his wounds, and disappear to some private island. He doesn't get to escape, Catherine said, her voice devoid of emotion. His humiliation must be as public as mine was. He stays. He'll keep his title. But I'm reassigning him. She picked up the phone. Send Mrs. Harrison in, please. Isabella stormed into the office moments later. The last 3 days of the audit had clearly worn on her. She was no longer the sleek predator. She looked ragged, desperate. You have to call them off, Isabella shrieked, advancing on the desk. This is harassment. You have no right to. Sit down, Isabella, Catherine said, her voice quiet, but carrying an authority that stopped Isabella cold. Isabella, shocked at her own compliance, sank into one of the chairs facing the desk. Catherine slid the binder across the polished wood. My audit team has found some discrepancies in your PR budget. Isabella's eyes widened as she saw the cover page. Forensic audit. I. Vance, executive expenses. This is $22 million, Isabella, Catherine said. Vance Innovations, Global Style Consultants, Apex Event Management, all shell companies, all registered to a post office box in the Cayman Islands, all controlled by you. Isabella's breath hitched. She was trapped. You can't prove that, she whispered. I don't have to, Catherine said, leaning back. The district attorney's office will. Mr. Grant has already forwarded this entire file to the SEC and the Manhattan DA. They found it compelling. Isabella's entire body began to tremble. You're sending me to jail? The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pathetic terror. Catherine, please, don't do this. He made me. He pushed me, the spending, the lifestyle. He's the one you want. Catherine watched her, her face unreadable. You did this to yourself. You were a thief. A clumsy one at that. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. And you never once thought there would be consequences. That's the problem with people like you and Will. You think you're untouchable. Catherine pressed a button on her desk phone. Sarah, please send in security. No! Isabella lunged forward, trying to grab the binder. Please, Catherine, I'll give it back. I'll give it all back. Don't do this. Think of what we... There is no we, Catherine said, as 2 uniformed security guards entered the office. There is only you and what you did. You can't, Isabella screamed as the guards took her by the arms. Will, do something! The guards escorted the screaming, struggling woman out of the office and into the main hallway in front of the entire executive floor. Employees poked their heads out of offices, watching as Isabella Harrison, the queen of Harrison Global, was marched to the elevator in handcuffs. Catherine stood and walked to her window, watching the silent, snow-filled sky over Central Park. An hour later, her assistant buzzed. Mr. Harrison is here to see you. He seems unwell. Send him in. Will stumbled into the office. He was a broken man. His suit was rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. He had clearly been watching from the sidelines as his wife was arrested. They took her, he whispered, slumping into the chair Isabella had just vacated. They arrested her, Catherine, in the lobby. The press was there. How did the press get there? I sent a release, Catherine said, sipping her tea. A proactive statement about the company's new leadership taking a zero-tolerance policy on executive fraud. Will stared at her, the reality of his situation finally dawning. He wasn't her partner. He wasn't her equal. He wasn't even her enemy. He was just collateral damage. What do you want? He begged, his voice cracking. My money? The house? It's yours. Just call them. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. You can fix this." "I'm not fixing this, Will. I am cleaning it. She stole from my company. She's a criminal. And you," Catherine said, her gaze hardening, "are an idiot. You signed off on it. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and so desperate to maintain your lavish lifestyle that you didn't even bother to read what you were signing. So fire me," he yelled, a pathetic attempt at his old bravado. "Fire me, ruin me, get it over with." "Fire you?" Catherine almost laughed. "No, Will, you're not getting off that easy. As of tomorrow, you are being reassigned." "Reassigned? To where?" "Harrison Global owns a number of subsidiaries, including," she pulled up a file on her computer, "a 20,000 square foot warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's our legacy document storage facility. It's where we send all our paper files from before 2005. It's cold, it's damp, and the Wi-Fi is terrible." Will's face went white. "A warehouse? You will be the director of legacy archives. Your job will be to digitally scan and catalogue 3 decades of shipping manifests. You will report to the head of logistics, a Mr. Peterson, who, I believe, you demoted 5 years ago. You will keep your salary. You will keep your title. But you will spend the rest of your career in a concrete box, looking at paper. You wanted to build a legacy, Will. Now, you get to archive one." He couldn't speak. It was a sentence worse than firing. It was erasure. She was making him invisible, just as he had done to her. "Get out of my office, Mr. Harrison," Catherine said, turning back to her computer. "You have a long commute tomorrow." 6 months passed. Harrison Global, under Catherine's leadership, was being rebuilt. She had restructured the debt, sold off the toxic assets, including the jet, the yacht, and the private island, and infused the company with Alistair's cutting-edge logistics technology. The stock was stable and beginning to climb. The board, once terrified of her, now worshipped her. Will Harrison had vanished. He was a ghost within his own company. He did as he was told, driving his modest sedan from his now empty penthouse, which was on the market as he could no longer afford the maintenance, to the cold warehouse in Red Hook. He spent his days in a windowless room, the click of the industrial scanner, the only sound. He was a laughingstock, the man who had everything reduced to a file clerk by the wife he'd thrown away. He had tried, twice, to resign. Both times, Catherine's legal team had reminded him that his employment contract had a 5-year non-compete clause which she intended to enforce. If he quit, he couldn't work in logistics, the only industry he knew, anywhere in North America. He was trapped. One evening, Catherine was working late, finalizing a new merger. Her assistant had long since gone home. The only light on the 50th floor was from her office. There was a knock. She looked up. Will was standing in the doorway. She hadn't seen him in months. He was thin, pale, and looked 20 years older. His expensive suit hung off him. "They won't let me up here," he said, his voice raspy. "I had to use the fire stairs. I have to talk to you." Catherine looked at him for a long moment, then nodded to the chair. "You have 2 minutes." He sat down, his hands trembling. "Isabella. She's taking a plea. 10 years. They're taking everything." "That is the consequence of her actions," Catherine said. I know. He swallowed, looking at the floor. I get it. Okay? You win. You won. You took the company. You ruined me. You ruined her. You've had your revenge. It's done. I told you, Will. This was never revenge. This was a hostile takeover. You were a bad investment. You were incompetent, and you were running this company into the ground. I saved it." "No," he said, looking up, his eyes suddenly burning with a new, different kind. This is a new, different kind of pain. This is revenge. Be honest, just once. This was all for what I did to you, at the gala, with the baby. Catherine was silent. The baby, he whispered. Our son. Catherine, I want to see him. Catherine's face, which had been a mask of corporate ice, finally changed. The neutrality vanished, replaced by a slow-burning, Arctic fury that was more terrifying than any rage. You want to see him? She repeated. Yes. He's my son. My heir. I have a right. A right? Catherine stood up, her voice a low, dangerous growl. You have no rights. You lost them when you sent your secretary to tell me you were in Zurich. You lost them when you never called, never visited, and never once asked if he was alive. You lost them when you tried to leave me, your pregnant wife, with nothing, calling me unstable in a court of law to try and take him from me. I was angry. Isabella. You were you, Catherine snapped. That was all you. He doesn't have a father. He has an uncle who taught his mother how to be strong. He has a name, Thomas Alistair. My name. Alistair, you took my name from him. You took your name from him, she said, walking around the desk to stand in front of him. You don't get to claim him now, Will. Not because you're broken, not because you're lonely, not because your mistress is in prison and you have nothing left. He is not your consolation prize. Will finally broke. He slumped forward, his face in his hands, and began to sob. Gut-wrenching, pathetic sounds of a man who had truly, finally, lost everything. Catherine watched him for a full minute, her expression cold. She remembered crying like that, alone in a cheap apartment, while he was celebrating with Isabella. This is the final transaction, Will, she said. He looked up, his face a mess. What? I am buying you out. She tossed a file onto the desk. This is a severance agreement. I'm waiving your non-compete clause. In exchange, you will sign this. It terminates your parental rights to Thomas. Officially, legally, forever. You want me to sell my son? He choked out. You already did, Catherine said. You sold him for a newer model, for a few more years of arrogance. This is just the paperwork. Sign it, and you are free. I'll buy your remaining, worthless stock options at yesterday's market price. It's enough for you to disappear. Go to Monaco or Singapore. Start over, or don't. I don't care. But you will never, ever contact me or my son again. Will stared at the paper. His signature. For his son. He picked up the pen. He was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He looked at Catherine, searching for one last flicker of the woman he'd married. He found nothing. Only the CAO. He signed the paper. Get out, Catherine said. He stood up, a hollowed-out man, and walked out of her office for the last time. Catherine Alistair stood at her window, looking out at the glittering lights of her city. She was alone, but she was not lonely. She was in control. She picked up her phone and dialed. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice instantly warm, all the ice melting away. Yes, I'm just leaving the office. Of course I'll be home in time to read you a story. I love you, Thomas. She hung up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the dark, silent office, the signed confession of William Harrison's ultimate failure sitting alone on her desk. The fluorescent lights of the JFK International Terminal at 2:00 a.m. were a merciless, buzzing yellow. William Harrison III sat at gate 42, his flight to Singapore delayed by an hour. He was just a man in a rumpled, off-the-rack suit, his face pale and puffy. He held a styrofoam cup of bitter, cold coffee. The severance agreement had been wired. It was a substantial sum, enough to live on, but it was finite. It was the last money he would ever earn from the company his grandfather had built. He was invisible. No one looked at him twice. He was no longer William Harrison III, the Lion of Wall Street. He was just another piece of human freight waiting to be shipped off. He watched a young family nearby. A father, looking exhausted but happy, was hoisting a sleeping little girl onto his shoulder, while his son, about Thomas's age, buzzed around his legs with a toy airplane. The man ruffled his son's hair. "Easy, champ. We'll be on the plane soon." A cold, sharp pain lanced through Will's chest, so intense it made him gasp. It wasn't the loss of the company. It wasn't the loss of his penthouse or his reputation. It was that. The casual, easy affection. The word champ. He had a son. A son he had sold for a non-compete clause. He had spent 5 years trying to build an empire for a child he'd never seen, all while destroying the woman who was raising him. He'd been so obsessed with his legacy that he had failed to see he already had one. He'd traded a human being for a balance sheet, and he'd lost both. When they called his flight, he stood up, dropped his coffee cup in the bin, and walked down the jet bridge without looking back. He had no one to look back for. 200 miles away, in a sprawling, warm duplex overlooking Central Park, a different building, one she had chosen, one she owned. Catherine Alistair was on the floor, building a fortress out of magnetic tiles. "And the dragon can't get in," her 5-year-old son Thomas declared, placing the last triangular piece on top. "He certainly can't," Catherine said, smiling. "This is the strongest fortress in the entire kingdom. Sir Thomas, you have saved us." This was the real Catherine. The suit was gone, replaced by soft cashmere joggers and a simple t-shirt. Her hair was in a messy ponytail. The office was steel and glass, but her home was plush rugs, overflowing bookshelves, and the faint, sweet smell of baked cookies. On the wall was not cold, abstract art, but a giant, joyful finger painting Thomas had made, framed as if it were a Picasso. She had just finished reading him Where the Wild Things Are, and now it was time for bed. She tucked him into his sheets, which were covered in rocket ships. "Mum?" he asked, his voice small in the dim light of his room. "Yes, my love." At school today, Leo was showing everyone pictures of his dad. They went to the zoo. He paused, his bright little mind working. "Mum, I don't have a dad, do I?" The ice from the boardroom threatened for a moment to creep into her veins. It was the question she had been dreading for a year. The last ghost of William Harrison, haunting her son's bedroom. She could lie. She could invent a story about a hero, a traveler, someone who had passed away. But she had rebuilt her life on a foundation of absolute truth. Lies were what Will and Isabella had used. They were weak. She sat on the edge of his bed and took his small hand. "You do have a father, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Everyone does. But your father, he was a man who didn't know how to love. He was a man who made very bad choices. He hurt people. And he hurt me." Thomas's eyes were wide, trying to understand. "Did he hurt me?" "No, he never got the chance," Catherine said, brushing his hair back. "Before you were born, I knew he wouldn't be a good father. He didn't know how to be kind or safe. And my most important job in the whole world, more important than running the company, is to keep you safe. So I made a choice. I decided it would be just you and me. We would be our own team, and we are, aren't we?" "The Alistair team," he whispered, a little smile returning. "The Alistair team," she confirmed, kissing his forehead. "You don't need to worry about him. He's gone, and he can never, ever hurt us. You have me. You have your nanny, Maria. And you have all the love you will ever need. Right here. I have enough for 10 fathers. He seemed to accept this, the truth, simple and clean. He hugged her neck tightly. I love you, Mum. You're the boss. I love you, Thomas. Now go to sleep. She watched him for a long time as his breathing evened out. She had defeated Will in the boardroom. She had exiled Isabella to a prison cell. But this, right here, was the real victory. This was the final, definitive act of erasing Will's poison from her life. She had protected her son, not with a fortress of tiles, but with the truth. A month later, Catherine stood at the head of the old Harrison boardroom table. It had been refurbished, the dark, imposing mahogany replaced with a light, warm oak. Thank you all for coming, she said to the board. I have one final piece of restructuring to announce. The board members, including a grateful Michael Davies, whom she had promoted, looked on. For years, this company operated the Harrison Foundation as a vanity project, a PR shield for its CEO's ego. It did nothing. It built nothing. As of today, I am dissolving it. A few murmurs. That was a big move. In its place, Catherine continued, a new energy in her voice. I am pleased to announce the launch of the Alistair Grant program. It will be a real foundation, endowed with $50 million from the company's new profits. She clicked a remote, and an image appeared on the screen. It wasn't a corporate logo. It was a photo of a young, struggling woman holding a baby. The Alistair Grant program, she said, her voice ringing with a passion they had never heard, will be dedicated to providing capital, legal aid, and financial literacy training to single parents, specifically mothers, who are trying to re-enter the workforce or start their own businesses. We will not be a charity. We will be investors. We will invest in the people no one else will, the people who are overlooked, underestimated, and counted out. She looked around the room, making eye contact with every person. I built Alistair Holdings on a simple principle: find an undervalued, failing asset and rebuild it into something strong, efficient, and powerful. That is exactly what this grant will do. But this time, we won't be investing in broken companies. We'll be investing in broken lives. She looked out the window. It was the same view she had stared at as a prisoner in her own home, 7 months pregnant and terrified. But she wasn't a prisoner anymore. She wasn't just the owner. She was the architect, and she was finally, truly, building something that would last. What a story of betrayal and ultimate triumph. From a publicly humiliated, pregnant wife to the CEO of the very company that cast her out, Catherine Alistair proved that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's a hostile takeover. She didn't just get even, she got everything. What did you think of Will's ultimate fate? Was it too harsh, or did he get exactly what he deserved? And what about Isabella? Let me know in the comments below what your favorite twist in this story was. If you loved this story of justice and revenge, please hit that like button, as it truly helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone else who loves a story where the underdog comes back to run the whole show. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another one of our dramatic, real-life stories. Thanks for listening.